Hi guys, my name is Devontae and I sacrifice my time so you don't have to. So if you missed the Dynamite video yesterday, I talked about Tony Khan making this announcement about signing a new acquisition, and he's going to make this announcement coming up tomorrow night, or actually what's today? Today's Thursday. I'm sorry, coming up on Saturday night at Full Gear. Now, obviously, let's just get the pleasantries out of the way. Let's actually not even the pleasantry. Let's get the obvious out of the way first, okay? Now, people are probably discussing online. People like Dolph Ziggler, which makes no sense because Dolph Ziggler, he just got released like a month ago. I'm pretty sure he's still underneath the 90-day non-complete clause, and I'm pretty sure WWE's not stupid enough to let him just get away that easily. I mean, maybe they are. Who knows? It is underneath a different regime. Maybe they might be that dumb. I'm not even sure, but whatever. I'm just going to assume that it's not him just based off of his contract stipulations. Well, Ospreay currently right now, from what I understand, his contract is going out there past Wrestle Kingdom. I think he's going to be done with them in either March or February, so that takes him out of the equation. Not to mention he still wrestles for AEW from time to time, so really, I mean, is that really that big of a surprise? I'm gonna be very good faith, and I'm gonna be very charitable, and I'm going to assume that Tony Khan is not a complete and utter dumb fuck, and he's not gonna make the same mistake twice by having some bullshit announcement twice in a row. One that I'm pretty sure he's very aware of had a very, very horrible negative reception to about a week or two ago. I'm going to be very good faith and assume that's not what he's going to do. I'm going to be good faith and I'm going to assume this person that he so-called signed is someone who's actually a big deal, that the wrestling fans actually respect, and it would be a legitimate surprise when they show up at Full Gear. Now, with that being said, I'm pretty sure everybody is thinking that it's going to be Mercedes Mone, FKA, Sasha Banks, and I'll keep going with the pleasantries real quick before I go out of my way to talk about this a little bit more further in depth. If they sign Sasha Banks, would that be the biggest person that they've ever signed? No. Would it be top 5 biggest people they've ever signed? Quite possibly. I'm not the world's biggest Mercedes Mone fan. Sasha Banks, you guys know that. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But at the same time, putting bias aside, I'm not stupid. I know her popularity online. I know her name value online. I know from a name standpoint, I can't think of a bigger free agent from a women's perspective. And to be quite frank, overall, speaking about the wrestlers in general, there are very few names who can really eclipse Sasha Banks right now in the department of notoriety, yet being somewhat in a free agent position. I mean, obviously the only person who obviously triumphs her right now is probably someone like a CM Punk. Outside of that, I don't really know anybody else who's a bigger name than Sasha Banks right now on the market in the free agent department. And her getting, or AEW getting her, would it be a big acquisition? Yeah, it'd be a pretty big acquisition. I'm not going to sit here and lie. I mean, you have someone who main evented WrestleMania, for God's sakes. I mean, you got someone who has a lot of name equity within WWE, who you're now bringing into WWE, and hopefully you can use that to the best of your abilities, because, I mean, hey, you pretty much got a star on a silver platter. I'm not going to bury Sasha Banks and ignore that she does not have that kind of position of power or leverage over a company like AEW, because she absolutely does in terms of her own star power. I'm not that ignorant, I'm not stupid, and I'm not going to sit here and say things that are completely untrue. Now, with that being said, taking that out of the equation, because again, you have very inept people who have their own predisposed bias, and then they'll say stupid shit. And no, I'm not talking about anybody in particular, I'm generalizing here, but you have people who will just have their own bias and their way of thinking about things, and then they hear what I say, and then it's not that they have a bias, but it's, oh, you have a bias, I have a bias, not you, guy who went out of his way to just blatantly out of nowhere just, oh man, this thing right here that you're talking about, ignore everything else for a minute, this specific thing right here that you're talking about at the moment, yeah, you have a bias for it. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this because you have a total bias for it. You should like this thing that I totally like, but you have a bias for it. That's why I'm talking about Sasha Banks right now, just to get that out the way, because, you know, people these days, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The internet, gotta fucking love it. But back to what I was saying though about AEW. Now, them signing Mercedes Mone, is that a good thing? Yes, it's a good thing. Them signing Mercedes Mone, is that going to be a thing that's going to further help them? That's based off of what AEW does. As I discussed yesterday when talking about why I think the women suck overall and they're super entitled and they're super lazy, you can throw Sasha Banks in that category. Maybe not so much from the lazy department, but definitely in the entitled department, believing that she is owed everything because of how talented she is. She is a talented person. I'm not going to take anything away from her, but it's not as if she's in a special category of her own. Sasha Banks, Mercedes Mone, once she gets on the main roster for AEW, give her like a week or two, maybe 3 weeks tops, and she'll fit in like everybody else on the roster. If Edge can fit in like everybody else on the roster, if CM Punk can fit on like everybody else on the roster, then who the fuck is Mercedes Mone to believe that, hey, I'm not going to be that kind of person who's going to fit everywhere on the roster. My problem, though, and I got twofold problems. I got a problem from a business standpoint and one from a more personal standpoint. Not me personally, but personal in regards to AEW and how this is going to actually work out in regards to Mercedes Mone in that locker room. So we're talking about the business side first. From a business perspective, okay, cool, you bring in Mercedes Mone. That's great, but what do you do afterwards when you bring her in? Who does she feud with in the end of the day? Do you put her directly into the women's spot because she's your biggest women's talent, even more so than the Paige, Saraya, however you like to refer to her, even bigger than her? What do you do for Sasha Banks initially when you bring her in? Is she a heel? Is she a face? How much face time do you give her compared to the other superstars in the roster? Because something else that you need to talk about, as I said before, not reluctantly, I blatantly said it, Sasha Banks being on the AEW roster at this point in time, not only will she outright be the biggest female wrestler that company has ever had, but she'll be one of the biggest wrestlers overall that company has ever had. So how much time do you give to Sasha Banks? That's a big question that I really want to know, because here's a newsflash for you guys who probably have your minds in the clouds, aren't thinking rationally, and again, right back to what I said in regards to that predisposed bias that you want to project on me, the guy who outright lets you know who his bias is or what his bias is about. AEW has a history currently going on as we speak of not knowing how to book women talent. Now granted, WWE isn't perfect, but you can see how they position their women, and you can look at AEW and how they present their women, and it's very obvious and it's very, very, very observable as to how they do their things positively and negatively. And you look at AEW side, they've and don't get it twisted, this is not just for the women, although it hits the women even harder, but it's just overall, Tony Khan has a horrible way of bringing talent on and just not knowing how to use them from the perspective of having them on television every week. He'll bring them on one week and then you'll never see them again, and they'll bring them on the following week and then you'll never see them again, then the following week, and it's very inconsistent as to how he books them on television to get TV time. And his response to usually doing something along the lines of that when he wants to put them on television, if he wants to break up the monotony of them being on television, is to use them on a Rampage or on a Collision, a show that no one really watches all too much, especially on the Rampage. And it's even worse because Tony Khan has this huge tendency of using the stuff like using the superstars, the pop if you will, as a way to merit the reason as to why he signed them to begin with. Like, he doesn't sign these superstars to use them to the best of their abilities to help forward the company. He uses them primarily to pop a number for that night or pop some type of news or generating some type of news response around that talent. That's a huge problem. Because it's like, okay, you bring Mercedes Mone, Sasha Banks into the fold, and you would think that, hey, maybe I should put her into a position where, hey, she should probably be the leader of my women's division going forward to really take it to someone like WWE's women's division. It's not to say that Sasha Banks doesn't have the capabilities of pulling out something like that, especially surrounding around the time that she currently is surrounded by. It's just the fact that if you put her in a position to pop a crowd and to generate news, you should further that by capitalizing on said news rather than just using it for the pop and then just, okay, that's good. Because as I said before, when it comes to Tony Khan's acquisitions, he's not paying for the superstar, he's paying for the pop. He's paying for the news. That's what he's paying for. And it's cheap and it's lame as fuck. So the question is, how do you book Mercedes Mone going forward, and what are you going to do with Mercedes Mone when she first gets there? Is it just a pop, or are you using her, or did you sign her to have her being used for future reference, right? Now, that's from the business perspective. Then we get directly into what I think everybody needs to talk about and what everybody needs to really, really focus on. Because I'm very indifferent. It's very 50-50 as to how I see Tony Khan putting up with a Mercedes Mone in terms of her booking. Because I think this right here kind of correlates with that right there, because maybe he might book her well. Not because he wants to, but because of how her attitude is going to be and how much of a pushover Tony Khan is going to be in the grand scheme of things. I have a strong suspicion that Sasha Banks is going to be a female CM Punk. Now, to the degree that she's going to go around starting fights and punching people in the face and, threatening their bosses and getting into multiple fights with multiple people and all this shit, no, definitely not. But do I see outbursts happening in the locker room? You're damn right. Do I see her confronting some of the women wrestlers because of the shit that they're doing in the ring that she's not comfortable with doing, or just anything alluding towards that path? You're damn right. Do I see Sasha Banks having a confrontation with someone like a Britt Baker in real life and them having legitimate heat? Do I see Sasha Banks having a confrontation with someone like a Thunder Rosa and having real life heat with them? Yes, I absolutely see these things, and I have to ask you, are you prepared to have that in your locker room? See, here's the thing about Sasha Banks that no one's actually talking about. When she was within WWE, specifically within the NXT in the early days of WWE, even though she had a big head and she had an ego, WWE structure and how they prioritize certain things within that company is so goddamn strong that it really does put your ego in check right when you step into the door. There's no having to check it in with Vince McMahon or with Triple H or with Shawn Michaels or with any of the higher ups. You can just look around the locker room. You see the talent, you see the veterans, and your ego instantly gets in check really, really fast when you step around these talents. With AEW, and I kind of got the feeling this is how CM Punk looked at this also, you have a bunch of, pretty much for the most part, a bunch of nobodies who don't know the first thing about fucking professional wrestling, who are happy to just be there, and you being the queen bee or the king and being just top shit, you are going to go in there and you're going to try to work the fuck out of all of them and actually think or put them, or actually make them believe that you're a way bigger than what you really are. Whether we're talking about Tony Khan believing all this other kind of stuff, or how the way the talent carries themselves, which kind of gives you the leeway to believe that you can actually throw your weight around. The thing is Tony Khan prepared to actually deal with this nonsense? And people can sit back and pretend all they want to. Oh, Devontae, you're being hyperbolic. Oh, Devontae, you're over-exaggerating. Oh, Devontae, how about we wait and see how it actually works with Mercedes Mone in the locker room? Okay, cool. You can sit there in La La Land and be completely delusional because your senpai makes you believe that you're such a special little darling in this world. I'm not you, and I'm not a fan of Sasha Banks, so I'll sit back and I'll say whatever the fuck I want to say from an objective standpoint, because it's quite fucking obvious that if you look at the lady's goddamn attitude and you see the way that she carries herself, even right now, quote unquote, building up into her path of signing with AEW, whether that's this week or whether that's in a couple of months, you can clearly see that she has a fucking disdain for the way things are currently being done in the business, whether you're talking about the fans or whether you're talking about the overall creative being done, period, in regards to her. So when things don't go her way at a certain point in time, whether you're talking about the fans and some big outbursts happening right there that Tony Khan has to cover up for, or the bullshit that's going to happen in the locker room when she inevitably gets into a very heated discussion, or maybe even something more physical with the women, I don't know how you don't see this. You're fucking ridiculous. And there's no amount of platitudes that's going to get me to believe that all this at the end of the day is something that is not worth to be looked at. I can look at this from a non-biased standpoint and I can absolutely say, hey, yeah, she's a big acquisition. But at the same time, I can also look at the opposite side and say, what are you going to do going forward with this talent? And are you prepared to put up with this talent's baggage that they are going to carry with them? Now, again, this is assuming she's going to sign with AEW. Again, we're all just using process of elimination and being very, very charitable I think it's the best word to say when talking about Tony Khan, because again, I only presume that he's not a dumb fuck to put himself into a position again to bring up an announcement and not have someone worthwhile actually completing said announcement. I'm being very charitable here, and I'm going to assume it's Mercedes Mone. If it's not, again, don't worry about this entire video. Although you could probably take it into context and use it for Sasha, you know, having a future signing with AEW. Who knows? But assuming that she is going to sign with the company, if this isn't worth talking about, if I can at least highlight the negative things, then I mean, what the fuck is the point of the channel at the end of the day, right? But yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you feel it's the right thing for AEW to do in regards to signing Sasha Banks? Would you like to see Sasha Banks within AEW? Do you have some further positives or further negatives you felt that I didn't talk about within the video that you want to discuss in the comment section below? Go ahead. As always, I'll be reading most of your comments. And that's about it. It's my off day, and I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing, which is relaxing, maxing, and chillaxing. Unless something, you know, big happens, and I'll be right back to cover some of these things because, again, I sacrifice my time so you guys don't have to. But with that being said, as always, my name is Devontae, and I'll be catching you darlings later. Deuces, P-Eyes.